Great. Hey, everyone. My name is Jason. I'm the Director of UES Education. For those who don't know, we are an organisation based in London, but we help students around the UK and indeed around the world get into international universities. We, for the most part, help students get into American universities, and a large part of what we do is help people with the testing aspect of it. As I'm sure you will all know, there has been a lot of changes to the tests, particularly how they're viewed in America, and there's been a lot of confusion about it. And what I'm going to do very briefly today is just update everyone on what's going on with the tests and what advice we've got for students who are thinking about applying to America, and what we think is going to happen in the near future, at least, with the tests. If anyone's got any questions throughout this, please pop them in the Q&A. Feel free to do that at any point. You should see a Q&A button at the bottom. I will answer the questions if they're pertinent straight away, but I'll probably answer most of them at the end. So feel free to ask any questions you've got about the SAT or ACT or about US admissions in general. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. So hopefully everyone can see this. Let's move on. I'm not sure why it is not. Oh, there we go. A bit of a hold up. Okay, a little bit about us. As I said, we're based in London. We were founded in 2013, so over 8 years ago now. And we work with quite a number of students every year. That's always increasing, mainly because the number of people who want to go to America is increasing every year. We help with all aspects of the US application process, and as I said, a large part of it is the SAT and ACT, and we work very, very closely with schools in the UK and Europe and around the world to help their students. So if you are a teacher or an advisor listening, please feel free to get in touch with me to find out how we can help support you. We've got plenty of references from lots and lots of UK and EU schools. So what we're going to talk about today, very quick introduction to the test, just to make sure everyone's aware of the two main tests. We're going to talk about what has happened with testing this year. We're going to talk about the changes to the tests. So there are a number of changes, particularly to the features of the tests. And we're going to talk, importantly, about test optional and test blind, what's going on with that in the moment in America and what that means for students. We're going to give some advice for your students or for the parents listening, talk about what students should be doing with regards to testing now. We're going to talk about the upcoming dates for the tests, of course, and just talk about the other things people need to think about in their applications. But as ever, what I want to do before we get started is just talk a little bit about why the tests actually exist. They might seem very esoteric, might seem strange when there are so many other things in applications that are considered in US admissions. So why do these tests still exist? There are a number of reasons. First of all, they give students a chance to show off their skills further. It's an opportunity for students to show that they are academically capable and indeed ready for college. They are ostensibly tests of college preparedness. So these are an opportunity for students to show that they are prepared, at least in terms of their motivation for college. They can prove to the colleges that students are willing to commit to working hard at something over a long period of time. The thing about these tests is that they are not tests of how clever a student are. They're not tests of how how good a student is in school or how much they know. There is a very, very strong correlation between how hard you work on the tests and for how long and how well you do on the test. More than any other test that students will have ever taken. And that is the point of these standardized tests. So students who think that they can just cram for it the way they do for other exams in school, or might do for other exams in school, will end up being very humbled by this test because they will do very badly on it. But students who are prepared to work at it a little bit every day or every other day over a number of months will normally do very well on the test. So it really shows students, shows colleges what kind of a student you are. They are standardized tests. Everyone takes the same style of test all over the world, and therefore it allows colleges to compare people on at least that even footing. And finally, this is really important now, it provides evidence to the colleges in lieu of school exams. Now, most students, particularly in the UK, will not have done GCSE exams and will not have done A-level exams when they go to apply. And this is because of the cancellation of these exams. So yes, they'll have grades from their school or centre assessed grades or whatever, but they haven't actually done an exam to prove that they're capable of that level. Whereas if you provide the SAT or ACT, you are proving that you're at that level. So they do become important, even though they might not be required by colleges. And I'll talk about that more in a moment. So let's talk about the two tests. So there's the SAT, which is currently on paper. It's held on Saturdays in some months. And then there's the ACT, which is normally held on computer, at least outside of the US, on Fridays and Saturdays, in the afternoons and mornings in some months. You only do one, not both. There are people, I mean, you could do both, but you really would be wasting your time. No one cares that you can do both tests. I understand that some people say, well, I'm going to pick one and work on that, see how I do, and then I'm going to do the other one. It is much, much better to make that decision early, make the right decision, and then prepare for that one test. Because in the end, all that the colleges care about, if you're submitting a score, is that it's a good enough score for them. And it doesn't matter about doing two tests. And just to dispel any myths, there are no colleges that require the SAT, but not the ACT, or vice versa. So it's very important just to choose the test that you're going to do best in. Now, to help you with that, we do have a free diagnostic test that's online. ueseducation.com/diagnostic will help students very quickly work out which test they're likely to do best in. It's very accurate. It's being used by quite a lot of students now, tens of thousands across the world, and it will tell you very quickly what is the best test for you. So we recommend that you do that and then start preparing for the test that you're most suited to. There are things called the subject tests, but there won't be for much longer. These were tests that were subject specific and in addition to the SAT or ACT, confusingly called SAT subject tests because it's run by the same company that makes the SAT. But it doesn't matter whether you were doing SAT or ACT, these were tests that were in addition. Some colleges required them, some colleges heavily recommended them. However, this has all changed and now no students, almost no students should be doing the subject test. There is only one date left, and that is June. So you've got about 1 month left. You can just about register for it now, but there are only very particular situations in which we would recommend that students do this now. So it's very, very unlikely that anyone listening will be doing the subject tests. And after June, they will be non-existent. And just to explain, no colleges will be requiring these tests next round, and many colleges won't even consider them. So just to explain what's happened over the last year, obviously we know that COVID-19 forced a lot of schools and test centres to close, and as a result, many test dates were cancelled. Now, since February this year, tests have started to kind of go back to normal, at least internationally. There were still lots of cancellations at the individual test centres. There were unfortunately lots of students who were not able to take the test on one of these dates since February, but every date has gone ahead in some form, and that is just getting better. The last SAT was at the weekend. Apart from a very small number of test centres, I think only 3 in the UK that gave advance warning of closing, none closed at the weekend. And we expect now that June and July ACTs will go ahead as normal, and then we expect that the August SAT will go ahead as normal, and then test dates will continue as normal after that, which is good news. So there is now no reason for students not to be able to take the test if they want to or need to. Now, as a result of these cancelled tests over the last year, of course, it was fair of colleges to stop requiring the test because so many students couldn't do the test. Now, I will come on to that because there were plenty of colleges that decided not to go down that route and still required the tests. But as a result, overall, colleges became a lot more competitive. It became a lot harder to get in. And that's what we've seen the results of in the last month or so as people have received their decisions. Now, the reason for that is that more people from other backgrounds that couldn't normally do tests or wouldn't have done tests were able to apply. So we saw applications, particularly in the early rounds, go up something like 60% at the very big names like Harvard. And even for other colleges that you might not have heard of outside of the US, places like Colgate, overall, they got more than double the number of applications they normally would have. Now, some of those applications are people who probably shouldn't be applying, and normally the SAT or ACT would be a good filter of those people, but there are plenty of other amazing people from backgrounds that just didn't have access to testing before who are able to apply now. So what that means for students, particularly in developed countries and particularly students who are going to private schools, you've got to think that your competition now is much higher, and you've got to think what you can do to try and prove that you are the right fit academically and otherwise for those colleges. And testing might be a way of doing that. Again, I'll explain more in a moment. But just to let you know, colleges have become much, much more competitive. And we're talking about admit rates for regular rounds of like 1 or 2% at the very big names. So we know that the colleges reacted by dropping SAT and ACT requirements. They went test optional or test blind. I will explain what that means in a moment. Most of them dropped the subject test requirements permanently. We will see the new requirements for colleges come out very shortly. There will not be any that require them because of the end of subject tests. But you must be careful. It's very, very easy to assume with this kind of new normal that you don't have to do the tests. Now, I've already explained that that might not be the case, and testing might be a good thing for you to do to stand out. But notwithstanding that, there is still colleges, literally hundreds of colleges, that still require the tests. There are some big examples of that, like Georgetown. It's going to be very, very difficult to get in without tests. We know that from the last round already. And places like Florida State require the tests and have not changed their minds about it. So there are plenty of examples where you have to do it. You do also have to be careful about scholarships. Sports scholars might have to do them. And people who want merit scholarships, some of those merit scholarships will require the tests, so you must be careful. And in any case, having good test scores will help you with academic merit scholarships. So it is still worth considering that. So how have the testing boards reacted? So I'm going to be repeating myself a bit here, but subject tests have been disbanded. Last sitting is in June. The SAT essay has also been scrapped. This was a new development. But the SAT and ACT both had optional essays. The SAT essay has been administered for the last time in May, so at the weekend, internationally. I think there's still one more chance for students in America if they really want to do it, but there's no point. So no colleges will be requiring that essay. Very, very few were doing it even before the pandemic. So there's now very little point in the SAT essay, and that's why they've scrapped it. The ACT is likely to follow suit in this regard, and that is because if the SAT doesn't have an essay, why would colleges be requiring essays from ACT students? There might be some that don't update their policies and might still say they require it, but I would think it's very, very unlikely that many colleges will actually require it at all. And it's pretty safe to say that students don't have to worry about it, but more on that in a moment. Over the last year, the SAT and ACT suddenly announced all these wonderful new features that we were very excited about. One of them was digital or at-home testing, where students would be able to take the test on their own computer at home or in school. That sounded great. It was immediately done by some other famous tests. The Duolingo English test used by lots of universities, IELTS and TOEFL for students whose first language is not English, GRE and GMAT for graduate students. They all immediately did this, went digital, allowed students to take it at home, and it was great. Worked really, really well, and was actually much more secure than people thought. SAT and ACT, we thought it would be amazing if this happens. Unfortunately, it did not. And this is a shame. And the latest announcements from the testing boards is that it's probably not going to happen until next year. It won't happen in 2021. They just weren't able to pivot quickly enough to be able to do that, which is a shame because the access to test centres has been very problematic over the last year. But still looking forward to that happening at the moment. The other one is section retesting. So this was from the ACT. What they were going to do was allow students to retake individual sections after they had already done a whole test. So if you do a whole test, you are happy with it, except for maybe the science section, you can practice that, go to a test centre and just take the science section. Brilliant. Unfortunately, they have now said that that's not going to happen this year either. So probably next year. Big shame. But one thing that has happened is that the ACT promised that students would be able to superscore their own tests, and that is now an option. So students who take more than one ACT are able to superscore. And what that means is that they can take their best sections from different tests to create a superscore that they can send to colleges. Now that sounds brilliant, but superscoring has always been around, but normally it was done by the colleges. And what would happen is that you would submit all your test scores and they would make a superscore and consider that. It wasn't up to you. But you can now do it yourself with the ACT. However, not every college is going to accept that. So we do have to be careful because this has only just come out. We need to check the requirements for colleges when they come out in the next couple of months to see whether or not they will accept a superscore. If they do, brilliant. Just send your superscore. If they don't, unfortunately, you're going to have to do what you always have to do, which is send your best overall score to the colleges. So let's talk about test optional. As I've said, there's a lot of confusion about what this means. So just to explain, it means that you don't have to submit your SAT or ACT scores to apply to those colleges. Now, at the last count, there were around 1,000 colleges that were test optional or test blind, but still a couple of hundred or so that still required them. But if they're test optional, you don't have to submit them, but you can still submit the scores if you want to, and they will be considered if you submit them. This has an obvious logical conclusion, and this is where the confusion is. If a college accepts test scores and will consider them if you submit them, submitting good scores must be a positive thing. Otherwise, why would they consider them? It is true that US applications are completely holistic and every bit of the application matters. But if you are submitting things that are good and going to help your profile, that is going to give you an advantage over the same student who didn't submit them. Now, there is no same student, so you've got to compare yourself to yourself. So what would happen if you did submit them? What would happen if you didn't? So the best thing for students to do must be to get good scores in the tests and submit them. But not every student is able to do that. So our advice is not across the board, everyone must be testing. That's not good advice for some students, because some students will be better off putting their efforts into another bit of their application, not spending all their time doing tests. But most students, I would say, who go to good schools in the UK or Europe, especially if they're in a developed country and go to a private school, consider what you're up against. Because students from similar backgrounds to you will be doing tests and will be getting good scores and will be submitting them. So to give yourself a big advantage, start early, start preparing for the test and see how you do. And if you can't get the score you need, don't submit it. Don't do it backwards. Don't think, right, I'll apply and then I'll just hope that I don't need to submit the scores. You're immediately doing less than other people. So do be very careful with that. More on that in a moment. Now, what do I mean by good? This is the hard thing. It's very subjective. It's if it's reflective of your academic ability and in line with what the colleges might expect. Now, you can check what the college profiles say about admitted students from the year before, because it will give you a range of scores, 25th to 75th percentile normally, and a median. So if you pick somewhere, I don't know, like Baylor University in Texas, their mid 50% range is something like 1290 to 1500, something like that. So you can be sure that if you're in that range, you're in the right academic range for that university, and then it's worth submitting it. But do be careful, because these test scores tend to increase when universities go test optional, because only students with good scores are submitting them. So you can probably add a few points to that to make sure you're in the right range, or look at the median. So in that case, maybe about 1350 is a kind of right range for submitting it. Don't take those numbers as gospel, by the way, I might be completely wrong. But do check to see what sort of scores that students normally to those universities get. And when I say reflective of your academic ability, I mean, what are you getting in your A-levels or IB? If you're doing 3 A-levels and you're predicted 3 A stars, you should be getting an SAT or ACT that's in a good high range of like 1400 to 1500 or above. if you're the sort of student who's probably going to get B's and C's, then no one's going to expect you to excel on the SAT or ACT. But getting a good SAT or ACT score can give confidence to the university that you can cope. What does test blind mean? This is much simpler. This is where scores will not even be considered by the colleges, even if you submit them. So then there's nothing you can do there. But it's unlikely that you're only going to apply to test blind places. So please don't do that. Don't choose your colleges just on being test blind, because you'll do yourself out of all these other opportunities. Overall, test blind and test optional is not new. There have been hundreds of colleges that have been test optional for a very long time. Famous ones are like UChicago, WashU, NYU. You didn't have to submit test scores to apply there. Didn't mean that people didn't do it. People still decided whether or not it was the right thing for their profile to submit it. Now, I've just mentioned this, but when should you submit scores to test optional colleges? Only if they're in range. So here's an example then, probably more accurate than what I was just saying. Do check the colleges for the middle 50% scores. We normally say you should be above the 25th percentile. CMU, for instance, last year was 1490 to 1570. So we would have said, 1500 and above, you'll be fine. But do remember now that's probably much higher. Occidental, for instance, Obama's first undergraduate college, last year was 28 to 33. You can be reasonably sure that if you've got a 30, you're in the right sort of ballpark there. And then if you're not in that range, then don't submit it. But do always ask for advice. We give advice on this. We help students with these tricky situations and questions all the time. So you can always come to us for advice. And as I said, please note that ranges will increase this year. We don't know what all the ranges were from last year yet, because not all the colleges have released them. They don't normally release them until much later. So these numbers up here are from the students who started last September. So it's going to be slightly different to the ones who will be starting next year or this year. So submitting below that range is not helpful. So if you don't have the right range, it's not reflective of your academic abilities, don't submit the scores. It's going to be harmful for your application. So who must do the test? Student athletes, as I said, be very careful. Now the NCAA has announced that they will be test optional this year again, so you don't have to do the test. But even then, you will dramatically increase your chances of being a recruited athlete and getting a sports scholarship if you have evidence that you're going to be able to cope academically at university. Because remember, if you're going on a sports scholarship, you're going to spend a lot of your time doing sports, but will also have to keep up with your academics. You'll have plenty of help there, but they need to be certain that they're going to be admitting people who are going to be able to cope, especially if you want to be a recruited athlete at like an Ivy League university or Stanford or something. They're not going to let you in on a very, very low A-level grades and only 19 on your ACT, because they'll be pretty sure you won't be able to cope with your degree once you get there. And the caveat to that is if you are an Olympic athlete, they're probably going to bend over backwards for you. But the sporting bodies, like the NCAA, normally have a minimum requirement which is very low, something like 10,040 on the SAT out of 1,600. But that has been waived this year. But that doesn't mean that students and athletes shouldn't be doing the tests. Merit scholars, as I said, so anyone who wants to have an academic scholarship, it could be a good idea to have a test score. You might have to. Of course, anyone who's applying to colleges where it's still required, for instance, Georgetown, Florida State, anyone who thinks that the test could show off their academic ability. So students who can get good scores will be better off submitting those scores. And our advice, which is going to come up, is year 11s and 12s should start preparing just in case. Particularly if you're in year 12, it's going to get very late very quickly. But year 11s, now is a great time to get started. Subject test advice, because the subject tests are being administered for the very last time next month, students should not take the subject test unless they've already started preparing for them. So if you've already started preparing, fine. Take them, have them on your resume, brilliant. Otherwise, only take them if you need them for colleges outside the US this cycle. So there are some colleges like in Korea, for instance, that require subject tests. And if you have applied to one and you need to get your test score, then fine, do the subject test. After this year, it won't matter anymore. So my advice is, if you are sitting there thinking, oh, great, I could do a subject test and maybe that will help. If you haven't started preparing, do not bother. It's a waste of your time. Just concentrate on your SAT and ACT prep instead, particularly if you're doing ACT, because you've got June and July tests coming up. So it's a really good idea to do that. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like students are going to be able to do the main SAT in June internationally. If you do have the chance, if you are in America or you have the chance to do it in America, then you could do the SAT in June. I'm not advocating you travel to America just to take a test, but if you're going there anyway, then that could be an idea. But do not take the subject test otherwise, unless you've already started preparing and you're confident you're going to do well. Our advice for the ACT essay is it is very unlikely that colleges are going to require it this coming cycle. And that is, as I said, because the SAT has disbanded their essay. We therefore advise students to start preparing for it to see how they get on with it. But if they find it easy, then write it, do it in the test. Brilliant. But if you don't find it easy, you don't like preparing for it, don't do it. It is probably going to be fine. If you absolutely want to remove all possible risk, then fine, write the ACT essay. But my general advice is start preparing for it. It's normally quite an easy part of the test, and particularly for people who like writing. So see how you get on with it. Get some people to mark some scores for you, especially if you're doing one of our courses. And then you can submit take the SAT score and submit it. But I doubt if there are going to be any colleges that will actually look at it. So it might be a waste of your time, but that's our advice. It is far more important to do well on the first 4 sections of the test, so the English, math, reading and science. Concentrate on those. The essay comes at the end of the test, so please put all your energy into the first 4 sections, and then do the ACT essay with your eyes half closed. It's much better to put all your energy into the first 4 sections. Just to let you know the test dates internationally, so outside of the US, the ACT, the next test is June. Then there's a July test. You can still register for these tests, and we would encourage it if you haven't yet, and you're an ACT student. Then from June, maybe July onwards, you'll be able to register for anything else this academic year, September, October, December, and anything through to July next year. SAT similarly, there are no SAT dates internationally left that you can still register for. You could register for the June SAT in America, but I doubt there's many people who are going to do that, unless you're in America. So from maybe the end of May, probably likely the beginning of June, you'll be able to register for other test dates ongoing. So August, maybe September, October, and December. There is an SAT date in September in America. It's still TBC whether or not that will be in the UK. It was last year. We hope that it would be this year as well. And then there'll be other dates right through to May next year that you can register for as well. Subject test, only one date left. It is June. If you have already started preparing for the subject test, or you absolutely have to do them because of another college outside of the US, then please do make sure you registered in time, because this will be your last ever chance. So here's our guide to when people should be testing. So if you're in year 11 or grade 10 in the American system, do take the diagnostic test now. I imagine that most people who are in year 11 are going to be finished with any kind of internal exams very, very soon, and are probably not taking external exams. So you probably starting to have more free time now. This happened last year as well. What we saw at this time of year and even earlier was people starting to take courses and get ahead on their SAT and ACT prep. You will find that it will save you an awful lot of heartache and headache later. Start preparing this summer. Consider doing a course. We've got courses running in the June half term, so that's week after next. Then we've got courses in the summer. We would highly recommend doing a course, or maybe getting a tutor and getting ahead on it. Course, I'm not advocating that everyone spends money on private tutors and things. So whatever you do, you must do practice, and this is a great summer to start doing it. Year 12, if you have not started preparing yet, you should have done. Most people should have taken the first test or their second test in the autumn, winter just been, and then you'll want to take your second or third test now. So you should have taken it in May. If you're doing SAT, you've got June, July for the ACT, but you should hopefully take your last test in this summer. So it is not too late. If you're an ACT student, you can do June, July, and then you could do September as well. And if you're an SAT student, you could do August, and then you could still do maybe September or October. But whatever happens, you have got this summer to prepare. Like I said, do not just assume you don't have to do the test. Please think about this very, very carefully. Year 13s, it is possible to take your final test. So this is normally more for year 12s who are going to go into year 13 this September. You could still take your final test then, but it's not recommended because you'll be doing all your applications at that point and you'll want to know what your strategy is. So it's better to try and get it done sooner. So what does this all mean for students? So year 12s, you should start choosing your tests and preparing, as I've said. Year 11, start preparing now. Students, whatever you do, make constructive use of your time. You should be thinking about how you can enhance your profiles. What can you do over the summer when you've still got limited opportunities for travel and things? So do think about courses you can do. Check out our blog. It's on ueseducation.com/blog. We've got some stuff on there about summer opportunities. Make some constructive use of your time this summer. Something you enjoy as well. Here's some vague predictions then. Colleges will continue to accept test scores. Many will remain test optional. I'd be surprised if that movement didn't continue towards being test optional. But tests will become more important, not less important. I'm not meaning to say that more people will be taking the test. I think fewer people will take the test, but they will become more important for students, particularly from very academic backgrounds, particularly students from developed countries, and particularly from students who go to private schools. And that is because you need to do more to prove that you are ready for college. And particularly this year because of A-level and GCSE cancellations. ACT and SAT will offer at-home testing next year. So I think, I've been saying this since last year, but it's a very optimistic, cross my fingers, hope that they will start doing it, because we've already seen how great it is with GRE and GMAT and TOEFL and IELTS. It's fantastic. It really changes what this test means for people. So I'm constantly surprised they haven't started it yet, but I'm sure they will soon. ACT, I'm sure, is going to scrap the essay this year as well. Pretty certain of it. My other prediction at some point is going to be that another provider will bring out a rival test. I don't see how that's not going to happen, because I think the SAT and ACT have rested on their laurels for too long. And I think that there will be someone who comes out and does it technologically better than them, unless they get their act together and do at-home testing very quickly and make everyone happy. A few other considerations. It's not just about tests. I know this whole webinar is about tests, and it might sound like I'm saying that you just got to do tests and that's the thing that's going to get you in. It's not. It's one of the first steps in getting admitted. The academics are very, very important because they're the first thing that colleges will look at, and it's a very easy way for them to say no to you. So do make sure that you get good GCSEs, good predicted A-levels or IBs. Make sure that you have a good test score if it's right for you. Those things will be the first thing they look at. Then it matters about everything else in your application. So your extracurriculars, what you do in your spare time, your essays will be important, as will be your references, your demonstrated interest. Going to be doing a webinar on that in June. And how you think about yourself and how you present yourself maybe at interviews as well. So all those things matter. And it's not just about those tests. So you do have to think about what you can do to highlight your best qualities. And it's really, really important that you choose the right universities. Find good fit universities that match what you want out of university and out of life, and you'll be in a much better position for applying. Overall, you just have to think about how you can use your time wisely now. You've probably got a lot of time on your hands, especially this summer, so use it. Registration, ACT registration is still open through to tests for July. You can register at my.act.org. SAT registration is open for tests through to June. So it's just one test left. That's subject tests only. The other dates will probably open in June for the next academic year. Now, whatever happens, register early. Normally at least 4 weeks, probably more. Over the last year, we saw plenty of people not get places on the test because they left it too late. It is a good idea to book well ahead and book several tests ahead, knowing that students will normally do the test 2 or 3 times. So please do register early. You're more likely to get a place in a test centre close to you if you do that. You won't have to travel over half the country to get there, or in some cases, fly to America or Paris or something to take a test. So just to finish off, a bit more about us. We offer advice and information on testing applications, as you can tell. We offer week-long and also weekly and school courses for the SAT and ACT. We work with a lot of schools to run courses in the school. So if you are an advisor that's thinking about that, please do get in touch with us. We also run our own courses in the holidays. Next one is in the June half term. There is still space, I think, for the SAT on that. So you can register for that. If you go to ueseducation.com/courses, there is currently a discount available for that course. So please do go ahead and do that. Private tuition is also available from us if that's something you're interested in. We have that diagnostic test. It's free. There it is again. And we have partnerships with sports scholarships consultants and global college counsellors who can help with everywhere else in the world. So please do get in touch if you want some advice on that. And there's our contact details. You can contact us on info@ueseducation.com. I'm going to leave that up for a moment while I go to the Q&A, because I can see that we have got a question here. And just to say to everyone else, please do pop your questions in the Q&A if you've got any questions at all. So this first one is, should you submit your scores if they are just average for the university you're applying to? For example, if you're applying to Brown and they would like a 33 to a 35, and you only got a 32 or 33, should you submit the scores? Well, you're talking about the very top end there. And you're right that Brown has a range of about 33 to 35. So I would probably say if you've got a 32, it's debatable about whether it's worth doing that. It does really depend on things like your school grades and how good they are, and also whether you're applying with some very particular niche skill. Let's say you're going for a recruited athlete position or something, then the 32 is definitely going to help. Or if you already know that you are a top flight musician, then they're going to understand that you're not going to be able to get as high as other people. But otherwise, I would say, I'd probably say don't submit a 32, but do submit a 33. But there's a lot of caveats there that I'd need to know a lot more about you to make that decision. But knowing nothing else, I would say, make sure you are in that range. If the range on their freshman profile is 33 to 35, then submit a 33, but not a 32. Next question is, can we take the test after 12th grade? Would that be considered as a gap year? So 12th grade is year 13 in the UK, so that's the last year of high school, and that's when you're normally applying, and you would go to college the year after. So the only way that you could apply to college and take tests after 12th grade then is if you took a gap year. There's no other way, because you would finish your 12th grade in kind of May time, and you should have already applied and received your decisions by that point. Some colleges will allow you to apply and then take the test afterwards, but normally only up to about February. So you would apply in December and take the test in February. For the most part, you must have done the test before that. So just to answer the second part of your question, yes, you could take a gap year. You could do a gap year and take your test in the gap year and then apply by the December of that gap year. That's fine. Some people choose to do that so they can concentrate on getting good school grades. Then they can nail their SAT and ACT early in their gap year and then go off and have some fun. Brilliant. And when I say fun, make some constructive use of your gap year, otherwise it's not going to look great on your resume. But yes, in principle, no reason why you couldn't do the test later if you're prepared to take a gap year. Another person's asked, the NYU median SAT was 1540 last year. Sounds about right. NYU has been test flexible, that we might consider test optional for many years. and therefore only students with very good scores tend to submit them. Is it worth sending a 1500? The answer to that question is yes, it is. 1500 is very, very good. Generally speaking, if you've got 1500 and above, it's good enough for anywhere because it's always going to be above their 25th percentile. A 1500 will never be a red flag for anywhere. So the only caveat I would say is if you got much, much higher on one section than the other, let's say you've got 800 on the maths, but only 700 on the English, it's quite a big disparity there. But if it's closer than that, then it's generally going to be fine. So I would say, yeah, if you're applying to NYU, 1500 on the SAT is great. But do remember your school grades will be the most important thing. So don't aim for perfect SAT at the detriment of doing well on your school stuff. Does the college admission process differ if you take a gap year? No, it only differs in the fact that you're doing it late. You might have an advantage applying in a gap year for two reasons. One is that you can spend some time in the gap year doing something really impressive that would look great on your resume. The other reason is that you will already have your high school grades, your final A levels or IB or whatever. Now that's really good because it means that when you apply, they will know what your grades are and they're not going off your predicted grades. So if they're good, great, that's going to help you. So the things to be aware of though is that if you apply to colleges, don't get in, and then take a gap year and try to apply to the same colleges again, it's going to be very, very unlikely that you'll get in unless you've done something really significantly different in your gap year. So if you are going to take a gap year, generally advisable not to apply to colleges and then make a really good go of it in your gap year. So, but other than that, there's no difference in the process. But do remember you'll have to get in touch with your school because they're still going to have to write references and things. So don't burn your bridges before you leave school. Okay, I don't see any other questions here. If you do have any others, you can type them furiously into the Q&A before I finish, and I will answer it. Oh, there's one here. Are gap years seen well in the US as they are in the UK, provided that you do things to add to your application during that time? Yes, they are. Gap years are not looked on negatively. What would be looked on negatively is the same as anyone else, which is if you spent your gap year just swanning around Southeast Asia and not doing anything, great, okay, it's fun, but it's not going to add to your profile and won't look like you've really used your time constructively. But if you go away and do something really meaningful that you care about, or you take a course in something because you're interested in it, that sort of thing is really good in a gap year. And colleges understand that people need time to find out what they really want to do in life. So gap years are great, I think. Especially after the year that we've all had, I completely understand why students might take a gap year. Some colleges will allow people to defer. So do be careful though, if you're applying to college, you can't assume that you're going to get a deferral. But it might be possible if you ask very nicely. Someone's asked here how to make up for extracurriculars in 12th grade. So I'm assuming you're saying that if you haven't done enough extracurriculars and suddenly you're in your last year of school and you need to make up for it, well, it's going to be tough because they're going to see on your transcript and your essays and your references what you've been doing for the last 4 more years. So you really should, and my advice to younger years is you need to find hobbies and interests. You've got to be doing more than just going to school and what's the bare minimum, because otherwise, how are you going to prove that you're a better fit for a college than someone else who's applying? It is also just good for your life to do hobbies and interests. Life is not just about school and lectures. It should be about the things that interest you. So please, please, please do go away and do those things. It's going to help you with whatever you do in the world. Even as an employer, first thing I look at on a resume is not what someone got in college, it's what they do for fun. That says a lot more about a student and an applicant than just how they did in college. So if you are in grade 12, then things you could do right now, look for positions of responsibility. Can you start a club? Can you become the captain of a club? Can you become a prefect or something? Can you become captain of your sports team? Can you pick up a hobby or start some volunteering or a part-time job now? Those sorts of things, very easy to pick up make sure that your teachers and your counsellor know about these things so they can mention it in your references. So my advice is just pick some things that you're interested in and look for opportunities to show off things like organisation, maybe some ingenuity and some self-startership, if you like. So being able to start something yourself and run with it. And someone's asked what kind of extracurriculars colleges really look for. There's no hard and fast rule here, but there are things that are generally quite good. So showing passion and commitment to something over a long period of time and doing something well to a high level is good. Showing organizational ability and responsibility for yourself and other people and leadership is good. Showing a willingness to give back to your community and help other people through volunteering or through teaching is good. Showing intellectual curiosity, so taking an interest in subjects outside of what you normally do in school is good. All those things are excellent. Of course, if you've got a particular skill or something you do to a very high level, that is also very, very good. Now, personally, I think sports are excellent. Of course, not everyone likes sports or can be good at sports, but sports are excellent because they show loads of those things. They allow you to show passion, commitment, responsibility, organisation, time management, leadership, all in one go. So that's why sports are so good. They also have the added benefit of keeping you fit and making you live longer. So there's no downside to doing sports. Whatever extracurriculars you're doing, please don't stop them when things start getting hard at school. That doesn't look good. If you can't cope with doing your extracurriculars while you're doing school, you definitely won't be able to cope while you're at university. Great, there are no other questions. So yes, there is. What are the best sites to look for scholarships for an international student? Well, that's the hardest question in the world. The truth is that there is no one site you can find scholarships. There are scholarships available at lots and lots of universities. Financial aid, which is means tested, is also available for international students at about 200 different universities. If you've got an external counsellor or a school counsellor, do ask him or her for help on that, and hopefully they'll be able to point you in the right direction and help you do research. But ultimately, it's about looking on the college website to see what sort of scholarships are available. Now, if you just go through, if you get the list of the top 200 or 300 US universities, go through each one methodically. It's going to take you time. This is how you do research. Go through each one. Look to see whether it's a good fit for you and look to see what kind of financial aid they offer to international students. That's going to be the best way of finding out whether or not you can afford it. Can you earn a sports scholarship if you are quite a high level but not part of a national team? I don't know what you mean by quite a high level. I mean, national team is extremely high, but let's say you're at county level in soccer or something, or rugby. The answer is maybe. It depends what you want to get. If you want a Division 1 NCAA scholarship, which gives you a full ride scholarship and pays for everything at university, my gosh, they are competitive. You are up against near national or international level people. So you have to be very, very good for that. If you are like a really good sports person where you are easily the best in your local area and probably one of the top people in the country, then you could maybe get into, maybe not Division 1, but maybe like a Division 3 scholarship, but it depends on the sport, depends what you want to get in terms of money, because not everywhere will offer actual money for the scholarships. Some places will just recruit you as an athlete and then make it easier for you to get into the university. So to answer your question properly, we'd need to know a lot more. We need to know what sport you're doing, what level you're at, what kind of academics you've got, because they will matter as well. The better you are academically, the easier it is to get a sports scholarship. And we need to know what kind of universities you're thinking about. Now, we don't actually help people get sports scholarships, but we can offer some advice, and we can certainly point you towards people that we trust who will tell you honestly whether or not you're at the right level. And if they think you are, they can help you contact the coaches, because that's the way you have to get a sports scholarship. Coach makes the decision. One person's asked, do people outside the US get merit scholarships? Yes, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of merit scholarships available to international students. So absolutely, yes. The way to get any kind of scholarship is to be a better student. That means being better academically. It means being a better fit for the university. I'll be very honest with you, if you are a kind of B grade student, you're probably not going to get a scholarship in America. You might get financial aid if you choose the right universities that match you academically. Then you could have a good chance of getting financial aid if you need it. But scholarships will be difficult unless you're very, very good. And one person's asked, are MUN, so I think you mean Model United Nations, are they compulsory? No, nothing's compulsory. You don't have to do particular extracurriculars. Just do things that interest you, that you can show passion and commitment for. If your school offers Model United Nations and you enjoy it, do it. That's great. Looks good on your CV. Not compulsory by any means. How hard is it to get a study visa to study abroad? Well, it's very, very easy. You just have to get into the university. If you get into the university will provide the evidence that you need to get your visa. It was harder under Trump because Trump banned certain countries from doing that, but it is now much easier. So don't worry about that side of things, unless, of course, you're coming from, I don't know where you're talking from. Like if you're from a country that's going to be much harder for you to get out of the country, then of course things change a bit. But generally speaking, you apply, you get accepted, you then take the evidence to the consulate and get your visa. You know, in the last year, it's been difficult because lots of consulates have been closed around the world, and that has made it very hard. And some students are not being able to come as a result. But I think that will change in the next year as the consulate starts to open again around the world. Okay, no more questions for now. I'm going to finish it up there unless I see another question come in, but I just want to say thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Thank you for listening to me. Again, there's our details. You can always get in touch with us, and we will happily answer any questions that you've got about US admissions. And if you do want any of that particular help, we also act as external counselors, so we can help you and your parents through the whole process of applying to America and elsewhere. And as I said, if you've got any particular questions about other countries or about sports scholarships, I can point you in direction of people who I think are very, very good. And someone's asked, where can I get college counselors for free? Well, your school, hopefully, will provide that. There are organisations, if you're in the UK, you could apply for help through something like the Sutton Trust. And they, if you get into the programme, it's very selective, but if you get in, they will guide you through that whole process. What I would say is if you are a high needs student, so you go to a state school and you're low income, but you're very high achieving, there are people who will help you. Now, what I would say is please drop us an email and let us know your situation, and we can always look into that. There are plenty of us who really care about what we do, very willing to help people we think stand a very good chance of getting in. Great, I'm going to stop it there. So thank you everyone again for attending today, and it's great to see so many people still interested. As I said, the number of people applying to America is bigger than ever before, and I think the fact that so many people turn up to these events is really indicative of that. So again, please drop us an email if you've got any other questions, but for now, thank you very much for listening.